Hey, JJ, I had a screen roll question for you. Is it fair to say that Minnesota really kind of committed to taking away Jackson Hayes' roles in that first round series and bringing DeAndre Ayton into this? He works in that area, likes to in the mid paint. You kind of talked about how he worked with Chris Paul. What's the balance though there of still kind of wanting him to attack a team like Minnesota that wants to take away the role, and how do you kind of coach that as to when you're going to go to what pitch there for the varying centers and depending on what the defense is doing?
They ran a lot of reds in that early in that series. So that was with Luca's pick and rolls. So there wasn't an opportunity as much to roll versus coverage later in the series. We got some good stuff when they blitzed in games 4 and 5. I know game 5 we ran a ton of stack and they blitzed. So I think we run our stuff and we see how they're guarding it, and then we make adjustments from there.
They have pretty much the same team, right? Maybe more minutes for Terrence Shannon Jr. with Nikhil Alexander-Walker being out. What is the most difficult thing to play against them, and where do you kind of see what's the most important thing you learned in that series about, and how that would translate to tonight's game?
Well, I think it starts with I'm stealing Jay Kidd's line here, but it really does start with good offense. We got to take care of the basketball. We got to be organized. That allows us to go back and set our defense, and we need to have a set defense against them. They don't, based on last year, they don't get a ton of transition opportunities, but when they do, they're really good. And, against the Warriors, you're worried about the lasers in transition. Against them, you're worried about everything. Terrence Shannon is dynamic in transition. Obviously, Anthony Edwards, McDaniels, Reed, all those guys pushing the basketball, and then they have a bunch of lasers on the floor, so you got to locate them. So our offense being organized and take care of the basketball to start our defense is going to be good. And then, with them, it's always the physicality portion. And that's both sides of the basketball. You got to be physical with them.
What have your conversations with DeAndre been like about physicality? I know that's been a thing that's been kind of talked about with him a lot in his career. Obviously, he's very skilled, but to get him to do kind of the run hard and bump into people type stuff. What have your conversations been like on that part of his game?
Consistent.
Well, how have they been executed?
He's been really good. For the last 2 weeks, he had 2 great days of practice. Thought yesterday was his best day in our scrimmage of pick and roll coverage. I think the habit portion for our bigs, I noticed this last year. There was probably a 4 or 5 year stretch where every big just ran to the top of the key, and then they ran back to the top of the key, and then they ran back to the top of the key, and they, it's really because everybody went to 5-out delay for like 5 years, and that's all anybody played, and so like they've been like programmed to do that. So we've got to break that habit with all our bigs and get him to put some pressure on the rim. And when he's done that, when Jackson's done that, it's been really good.
Is his defensive physicality ahead of his offensive physicality? Are you seeing him playing with more force on one side of the ball?
No, because we've seen, part of physicality is screening. I think of all our bigs, he's done the best job of, anytime there's an elbow catch, he's done the best job of holding his ground and getting the catch in the right spot versus getting pushed out past the 3-point line. So I think both improving and both good for right now, and we'll get to great.
JJ, you mentioned them switching in the playoff series with their bigs onto Luca and AR and LeBron. It felt like that was something they were willing to live with of if they get beat in that one-on-one matchup. But with how Luca and Austin have looked physically so far to start the season, I think they went 18 for 20 combined in the paint against Golden State. How much more difficult is or more confident are you in that matchup with the way that they've looked in terms of getting downhill, beating their man, getting to the paint, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I know what you're getting at. I'm really confident where both those guys are at right now. Whether it's coverage, whether it's off-ball actions. We ran an off-ball action to start the second half. Luka turned the corner. Gabe set a wonderful screen and got in the paint. So I think both those guys right now, their ability to get in the paint and then make good decisions is at a high level. And I'm confident. We're prepared for whatever defense they throw at us, whatever coverage they throw at us.
We have the same starters as the opener.
Yeah.
With Marcus specifically, how would you compare, even if their games are different on the court, how would you compare what you're asking from Marcus as you did from Dorian last season when it comes to defense, leadership, and communication?
I think it's a fair comparison because we're asking him to do a lot of the same things. Being both a point of attack defender and a versatile defender that can switch and be physical with bigger players, be disruptive. His rim protection is a little bit different than Dorian. Dorian's rim protection was length and altering shots and blocking shots. Marcus is a charge guy at the rim. But overall in the preseason and so far in the first game, the ask versus the reality has been pretty consistent for what we want him to do and what he's actually given us.
JJ, these last 2 days of practice and today's shoot around, how much was that an extension of training camp? And did it allow you guys to do more teaching that you wanted to get done?
Yeah, I think it was just a really detailed reinforcement of some things that we did throughout training camp, but have to build. You look at what our shifts look like in January, February, March, April in that playoff series versus what they look like the other night against Golden State, and it's night and day. So we in some ways you got to get back to the fundamentals on defense, but we spent a lot of time both Wednesday and Thursday on that, and today's shoot around was more of a mental day. We spent about 40 minutes on the court, but it wasn't rev them up and go. It was mental for both sides of the ball.
JJ, you guys are outscored 33-18 in bench points in game one. Is there like a benchmark that you like to get to? I think assists last year, you guys had 30 assists as a number. Is there a number for bench scoring? And then is there a player that you have identified or think could be the kind of leading scorer off the bench to get the majority of those points?
I just want guys to play their roles.
Coach Laravian Smart, played together before in Memphis. Sorry, what does the team gain when both those players are on the court at the same time?
Say it again.
What does the team gain when
Laravian
Smart?
Well, Jake has proven in his short career that he can be a disruptive defender, and I think Marcus is too. I think with Jake, there's positional size there. If we can get both those guys we use the term blender, starter, and finisher on the offensive end. I think both those guys can be really good blender, starters, and finishers for us. So playing off a closeout, and then a finisher is making that catch and shoot three. Both those guys are more than capable.
JJ, this is Chris Finch's sixth year with Minnesota. He's had a lot of success with the organization. When you played for him in New Orleans, could you tell that he would make a good NBA head coach and maybe have the level of success that he's had, and maybe what are some of his strengths?
Yeah, it was very obvious from the time we spent together that he was not only going to get a shot to be a head coach, but was going to be a really good head coach. I think he's a great communicator. We talked about this a ton back then, but he was playing in England and then basically got asked to coach the team and had never wasn't a coach. You wanted to play, and so you're playing in England, and that's not an offense, but this is just coming from him. So if English basketball fans get mad at me, please be mad at Chris Finch. But he's like, offensively, to create like advantages and good shots, you got to be really creative. And so, I think he got like by default just had to be really creative offensively, and you see that a lot with him and in watching them on film, and because they've had such continuity, you already see like the wrinkles he's added this year to some of their stuff. And he's also like someone who will tell it to you straight. And I think players always appreciate it. I know I did that. He told me to stop taking mid-range shots, even though I, whatever, top 5 in the league for 8 straight years. But it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
JJ, you were talking about kind of learning how to play as hard as you guys were playing last year. How much of that is kind of an individual decision that each player makes versus just kind of a learned skill that the team kind of develops as the season goes on?
Yeah. I think it's both, and I think it's probably both for the individual and for the team. I've seen this not just with like young NBA players, but I think any young basketball players. Most players don't understand what playing hard is. They actually don't understand what that is, and they think they're playing hard, but they're not. And so you have to reinforce when they are playing hard. You have to show them on film when they are playing hard versus what does it look like? They have to see what it looks like. The team has to see what that looks like. The other part of that is when you do have 1, 2, 3 guys that are leading in that way, it forces everybody else to play hard because you stick out like an eyesore. So it just takes a couple guys going full tilt and everybody kind of has to follow suit.
Sorry if you mentioned this earlier. Jackson Hayes with the knee soreness, do you know if he'll be available and how he's doing?
He's out.
How do you kind of account for that, just given what he's been giving you so far this preseason and first game?
Christian is active, and we'll figure it out based on who's on the floor.
What did you talk about playing hard there? What did you make of Luka's defensive energy in game 1? And you talked about reinforcing stuff. Were there clips and stuff like that you reinforced him in terms of his effort and engagement level on that side of the ball?
I thought it was solid. I mean, it wasn't perfect. I don't think many things were perfect the other night. There was a great clip, left wing ISO with Steph, where he got into the ball, had to force multiple moves, no separation created, took a tough step back 2 that missed and got a great contest. I think towards the end of that game, the Jimmy Steph pick and roll that gave us some trouble. And some of that was communication. Some of that was, I think, just making stuff up on the fly. That could have been better, but I think overall it was solid. We did show him the Steph clip in front of the team. Yeah.
Hey, JJ, can you teach someone to play hard, or is that innate? And I know you talk about Steph as the ultimate example of a guy who's able to enter the flow state. Who's the ultimate example of a guy who plays hard?
I do think you can teach it. Yeah, I do think you can teach it. And it's different for every guy how you sort of have to reinforce that. We had one of the guys on our team. I told, I don't think you know what it means to play hard. And that's okay. We're gonna get you there. And one of the things I said to him was, if I'm not telling you you're playing hard, that means you're not playing hard. So you'll hear it when you're playing hard. So you should assume you're not playing hard if you're not playing. If you don't hear it from me, he had 2 great days of practice. Had a stretch in one of the preseason games where it looked really good. We showed him, this is the difference between the 2 things. What does that feel like to you? You talk through it with the player. Some guys I probably will never get there, and those guys generally don't play in the NBA very long. I think there's a lot of guys that are, the play hard guys. I think there's a lot of those guys, and it pops. You saw 2 nights ago, Blake Wesley comes in the game in the first half, and he's like a total maniac, picking up the ball full court, pressuring. TJ's a great example. Josh Hart's a great example. Those guys, they play hard every night.
Thank you.